Okay, back to the construction of a mikveh, basically the general way it works. So we learned that the city water becomes rainwater, halachically becomes rainwater, either with hashaka, which means the two waters through a hole touch each other, and literally it means kissing each other, so that connects the two together. Then you have another way, what's called zriya. Zriya is the water comes and goes, hits the rainwater and then goes off into the other bar. That's also called. And then you have also what's called amshacha gimel tvachim agabe karka. These are all additional things that by going 3 tvachim on the ground, so then even if it's mayim she'uv and even if it's city water, drawn water, it still becomes considered halachically rainwater. Those are the things we said. So in the mikvahs, you try to, like we said, the poskim write, you try to build a mikvah according to all possible situations. So now you asked the question yesterday, if I remember, I just reminded myself that you asked the question, but when the two waters meet, eventually they dilute each other. So why doesn't the rainwater become diluted when it hits and it goes back and forth? So eventually, or even if it's on top and the bottom. So the advantage of top and bottom in many respects, but in one respect is because the mikveh yutevelin is warm, heat rises. The rainwater is cold, so it stays more up on top, the warm water, rather than, but if it's side by side. So the answer to this is like this. There's a halacha in the Mishnah that's called nasan sa v'natal sa. What happens, it means like this. Once you have a mikveh of kosher rainwater, you can dump 100 gallons of city water into the mikveh still remains good. Now, what happens if I take out from the mikveh, from rainwater, I take out a gallon of rainwater and put back in a gallon of city water? Nasan sa v'natal sa. You put in a gallon and you take out a gallon. So the din is up to half the mikveh, adruba, until most of the mikveh is still rainwater, it's still kosher. Now there are people that are chatchila machmes, so they try to do things in a way that there's always a constant hashaka, there's always a constant thing, that the rainwater doesn't become diluted in the regular city water. But according to halacha, as long as at one time you don't have taking out more than half the mikveh and putting back other water, once you have a kosher mikveh, the mikveh doesn't become ruined. For instance, a very simple thing: if an impure person immerses in the mikveh, why doesn't the mikveh become impure? The din is, an impure person has to immerse himself to become pure, right? Why doesn't the mikveh become impure when an impure person immerses in the mikveh? The answer is, once you have a kosher mikveh, it doesn't become impure. Now, it can become invalidated either by a leak, going out, or other way, that it's not rainwater anymore. But then that's a rare issue. But you have to make sure when they build a mikveh, if a mikveh is built right, properly, it rarely could become possible unless, God forbid, there's an earthquake, that the mikveh shake, the place of the mikveh shakes. So then maybe, if the foundation of the rainwater will shake in an earthquake, maybe then you have to check it afterwards to make sure that it's still intact, that there's nothing leaving out of the mikveh, nothing leaking out of the mikveh. In addition to that, mikvehs have to be checked periodically to make sure that there is no leak in the mikveh. Now, there's different issues with that measuring. So what do? They try to find a day that the mikveh is not used for 24 hours. Let's say Tisha B'Av, right? Tisha B'Av, the mikveh, you can't go to mikveh the night. Women also don't go to mikveh the night Tisha B'Av. So the night before the night of Tisha B'Av, right, the day or whatever, they go and they mark the level of the mikveh, especially the rainwater. They mark with a marker, like where the level of the rainwater is. Then they see the next day, 24 hours later, if it's down or not. Now, even if it's down or not, but it doesn't mean the mikveh is a problem, because there's evaporation, and then you can have, let's say you have a filter, and the filter takes the water out of the mikveh, puts it through the filtering system. There could be a leak in the filter, which doesn't matter to the mikveh. Leak in the filter doesn't do anything to the mikveh. So sometimes not all the water that's going out of the mikveh is coming back into the mikveh. Plus, a lot of times when the mikveh, if you ever see the filters work, it's gushing water. It's not like dripping water. It's gushing water. It's a big filter. So a lot of times when the water goes on top of the cement, the 3 tvachim, and yes, they build cement walls on the side that the water shouldn't just go all over the place. But still, you can have water that... all these things are taken into consideration when you do it to make sure that that evaporation is under control and basically that there's no leak in the mikveh. Pumping? You mean if the filter's on, is the mikveh good? Huh? That's pumping.
So what's the definition of leaky mikveh?
That there's a hole in the cement. That after a while, if it's not made with proper waterproofing,
The way you told us, you cannot measure it because it could be this, it could be that.
Yeah, but so you look, you see how the filter is leaking and how much water. Yeah, people know how to do it.
So this recirculating is not considered leaking, is it?
Okay. Well, the question is if the filter is on and you tavel, is it kosher? Okay. So bottom line is, by women, they make them go back again. Okay? No, so in mikvahs, let's say women's mikvahs, how do they know if the filter's on or not? So most mikvahs, there's a light right over the mikvah, like a red light, that if the filter's on, that light goes on. Okay? So just by looking at that light, if it's red, you know the filter's on. You have to close it. If the light's not on. Now, or you can really tell if the filter is working in the mikveh. You should have a tour of the mikveh. If you have a filter working in the mikveh, you can see water coming back into the mikveh. Because it goes out and right away it comes back in through the filter. It's a quick process. So you can see it coming in. That's not an issue. By the way, in halacha it says that if a person tavels in the mikveh, and because of that water goes out of the mikveh, from there immersing, it's not a problem.
But in Yeshiva, the water is coming, is gushing.
So I don't know what the story is with the filter. Now the truth is, okay, I'm not paskening now la halacha, I'm just discussing it. And there's a truth. Rabbi Moshe and other people say there's a whole discussion about the filters. Many of the Hungarian Rabbonim were against filters. They still are against filters.
Against what?
Filters in the mikveh. I'm talking about women's mikveh. Men's mikveh is a whole different story. For women's mikveh, the Rebbe was pushing that they should have filters because the water is much cleaner. If the water is cleaner, like this, if the water is dirty, women will hesitate to use mikveh. Like this, they'll use mikveh if the mikveh is clean. And the issue is not even an issue, really. Even though, again, halacha l'maaseh, if a woman goes to the mikveh and the filter's on, they make them go back again. But technically, it's like this. As somebody explained it to me once, very simple and very easy. If I have a mikveh, okay, and I take a bucket, a quart, that you wash your hands with. I put it into the mikveh and take water out. Does that mean the mikveh is leaking? No. It's not a leaking mikveh. I'm just taking water out of the mikveh. Yes? Now, if 10 people would do it at the same time, take 10 quarts out of the mikveh, would that make the mikveh leaking? No, the mikveh is not leaking. There's something else taking out the water. Okay? If you think about it, what's a filter? Instead of 10 people doing it, it's 100 people doing it with the filter. Okay? So it's not that the mikveh is leaking. Something else is taking water out of the mikveh and putting it back. So it's not really the mikveh is not leaking. There's something additional power taking water out of the mikveh. The mikveh itself is not leaking. Not only that, I was at my grandson's bar mitzvah in Newport Beach. So Newport Beach, he was there. The Newport Beach is right next to John Wayne Airport. And every 3 minutes, a plane flies over. So I'm like, the bar mitzvah kid was waiting every few minutes. He stopped until the plane flew over, and then he continued. You couldn't hear him otherwise. There's ambulance, not so bad. What did it say? Oh, another din is like this. The Gemara, the halacha is chila she'enin eina nikeres. If it's a non-noticeable leak, it's not called a leak. A leak is when you can tell after a day that it's leaking, it's substantial leaking. In this case, when the water goes out and right away comes back in, it doesn't look anywhere like a chila, it's not called chila nikeres. But again, practically speaking, if a woman goes to the mikveh with a filter on, she has to go back. By men, they're more lenient because it's a whole different story.
If you are using a swimming pool in a hotel or something, you have to shut off the...
You could if you want to end up in jail. I wouldn't suggest to shut off the filter in a hotel. If you want to do it in your... Yeah, but the question is, even mayim shuvim that leaks is also no good. If I build a mikveh connected to the ground, yeah, and it leaks, for a man it's also not good. Zeichlin is not good for a man either. It's not a kosher mikveh. So even a man's mikveh, I mentioned the other day, if you take a swimming pool, a big swimming pool, you buy for the kids, and you put it on top of the earth in your backyard, and you fill it up with rainwater or regular water for a man, it's not a kosher mikveh because it's not connected to the ground. It's standing on the ground. Mikveh has to be connected to the ground. So there are ways of connecting it to the ground. A guy was advertising not long ago, for $400 you can get a beautiful men's mikveh. Basically it's a jacuzzi and it's with filters and everything. It's not rainwater, obviously, and you can buy it, and they give you instructions how to connect it to the ground. So they're right, for $400 you have a warm men's mikveh. I don't know if this was the advertising months ago, a year ago, whatever. But so again, when you build a mikveh, you need actually an expert person making sure the mikveh is built properly, and there's constant supervision on the mikveh. You need Rabbanim that are always checking the mikveh periodically to make sure that there's no issues with it. There could be always issues with it. Okay, next. Okay, now that we're done with mikveh, let's go to the next dinim of, we'll learn a little bit about Hilchas Milah. I'm just going in the order of Kitzur. So the dinim of a bris milah, okay? Now, the din is that father has an obligation, a biblical obligation to circumcise his son. The woman does not have an obligation to circumcise her child. The mother does not have an obligation to circumcise the child.
Under strenuous circumstances, can she? Under certain strenuous...
What do you mean, can she arrange the male to do it? Yeah, but it's not there's nobody else. Can a woman do a bris? Yeah. So there's a story in Chumash with Moshe and Eliezer. Moshe was leaving to Mitzrayim, and Eliezer wasn't circumcised, his second son. And the snake came, and the tzipora took a stone, and she gave him a bris. So under certain, it's not so pashut, because the Gemara learns that somebody who's obligated in the mitzvah themselves can do it for others. But there is a Gemara in Avodah Zarah that says women are considered circumcised. The Noshim command the Mal Yudam, the Gemara says. So it's not that women don't have the mitzvah of bris milah. They have the mitzvah, but they're circumcised already.
No, I'm saying if a mother can circumcise her son.
I heard what you said. I said normally it shouldn't be done. Under certain circumstances, there's mamish nobody else, then she could do it.
But the commandment of circumcision wasn't given at that time.
It was given to Avram Avinu.
That wasn't part of the...
Yeah, but it's still obligated. All the children, they're supposed to, in Mitzrayim, Levi did a bris on the kids. The other people didn't. And the night they left Pesach, everybody did a bris. But they were obligated to do bris milah. They were obligated to do bris milah. From Avram Avinu became the mitzvah of doing circumcision. The Rambam writes, this that we do bris milah today is not because Hashem told Avram Avinu to do it, because that was before Matan Torah. We do it because after Matan Torah, it says in Parshas Tazria, Bayem Hashmini Yimol B'Sar Olosei. The Torah says you have to do a bris on the 8th day. But the Yidden were obligated to do a bris milah before Matan Torah.
So why didn't they circumcise in Egypt?
Who? Why? Because they didn't do a lot of things in Egypt. They're Egyptianized. Okay, now, so really the mitzvah bris milah, by the way, is a mitzvah for the father to do. And therefore, if you ever listen to what's going on at a bris, before the actual bris, the moil says to the father, you are appointed, he gives him the knife, and he gives it, and he says, you're appointing me to be your shliach to do the bris for you. Because really the obligation is on the father to do the bris. I wouldn't suggest it. So the father appoints the moil to be a shliach, and then it's considered as if the father did it.